If you can imagine like that, the sound and the frequency being able to change the state of matter. So changing hardened earth into liquid earth and then pouring it. Because a lot of this, like old rocks and like you gotta, like when you start really looking like in riverbeds and other places, you see these old structures that look slightly man-made. And you know, we gotta start going, wait a second, like there's so much infrastructure, and even some of the river stones and all that. Sometimes they look all squared off, and and if you just put your thinking cap on when you're out in these places, it'd be like, what am I really looking at here?
I know.
Because was this an old site? And they were built to last, so to speak, and they have lasted, but they were built as living libraries that would last on purpose because they knew stone would last a long time, and then it's a record. It was not. It was, they were teaching building. The building itself was a teaching device, and then it was also built to teach later civilizations and to remind us of what was, you know, going on back then. If you take a shell, like one of those spiral shells, conch shell, like is it a conch shell? Yeah, the one that spirals. Yeah. So cutting that at a certain angle and opening it is where the letters of Sanskrit and Hebrew came from. Oh, so in other words, if you think of language as a whole, so the original spoken word, whenever that came about, came from this, you know, you can say magical idea that the language itself initiated in unity and all fits together perfectly. The general overarching concept is that, you know, the idea of what we call Lemuria, which could have been multiple civilizations over multiple tens and hundreds and thousands of years of time, would have been just like anywhere. Like civilizations shift and change and grow and fall. Maybe those have more longer lasting ones, but it wouldn't have been just one civilization. It would have been multiple civilizations over eons of time that then began to, like, and particularly focused in the land masses that are empty right now as they're under the ocean. So the idea is that the motherland sank. And the motherland sank over time. And there may have been moments of great cataclysm where lots of stuff sank.
Hello, namaste, and welcome to the Soul to Soul Conversations podcast with Caroline Crawford, Paul Crawford, and today we are absolutely thrilled to have joining us the amazing and beautiful Chiraya Dharma. Chiraya is going to be talking to us all about the ancient civilization that is just so fascinating of Lemuria.
Yeah, and I mean, you have so many talents. And I wanted to get this absolutely right because it's really important, this. Now, Chiraya is a speaker, author, a manifesting mentor, spiritual wisdom guide, and brand coach who brings levity to us all. And we've experienced that so far today, haven't we? To enlighten up through her online programs, her books, podcasts, and her speaking engagements and events. And you can find out more about her at chirayadharma.com. But I'm going to have it all on screen and in the descriptions below. And there is so much more there. I mean, you have a huge amount of knowledge about a lot of the ancient wisdoms, as well as the current wisdoms as well. And that's what we're really looking forward to, exploring that in this little time that we're going to spend together, just so we can understand, get to know you a little bit more, as well as the wisdom and understandings that you have of Lemuria and who knows what else.
Thank you so much. I'm really grateful to be here with you both. You're both beautiful, wonderful beings and friends who also have such a wealth and breadth of knowledge and desire to help humanity in our awakening process. And so we're all in here for a wonderful show.
So I think you were going to, Chiraya's just going to start and just bring us into a beautiful space. And so I'm going to hand you back to Chiraya to bring us into that beautiful space.
All right, I will do that. Thank you so much. Yes, since we're speaking about what we call Lemuria, And since, as many of you probably already know or sense, that was much more of a yin or female, feminine, not female, so the divine feminine, the more nature connected, right brain, wisdom generating, kind of more watery feeling of a civilization. We thought it would be nice to kind of just remember that right now at the top of the show and invite everyone to take a nice deep breath. And as we make the out breath longer than the in breath, it actually helps us shift from our beta brain to our more of an alpha state and deeper brain wave states, and also connect more with that right brain. And the left brain is a beautiful thing. It sorts data. It has all kinds of bits of information, and when that is in service to the higher mind, which can source the energy of the universe and all of our wisdom and knowledge from the field, then it's in its right place. And in our modern civilization, one of the big differences between how we are today and how we were then is the fact that beta brain, or that monkey mind, has taken over, basically. And that's our natural, normal, everyday way of operating. Whereas, let's say, in what we call the Lemuria, Kumari Kandam, back in the day, Mu, and all these ancient civilizations, we were completely the opposite. We were very, very much slower in our breath and our connection to the natural world and all the councils of beings, and from the critters to the trees and even the rivers and the inanimate objects. Even like every little thing, like tap the couch and tap the chair and wake it up. And like, in other words, the idea that God is everywhere.
Well, it is.
And the one is everywhere because it's all there is, and it's all it is. So can you imagine, and this is what we're bridging into, what you were mentioning about what Greg Braden was saying, is that we're shifting, we're rekindling that level of awareness and consciousness now, and it's life-saving and life-changing to do that, because it's a solution mindset that's not just based on limited data of the data processor part of our brain. If that makes sense.
Definitely.
So before we kind of ride ahead, shall we say, just regarding Lemuria, that ancient civilization, Chiraya, where was it location? At what time? I know there's a bit of controversy over that. Was it here? And who first discovered Lemuria?
So let's go even further back, for starters, to what was called Mu, which is when all the continents, the tectonic plates, hadn't shifted away from each other. Because if you look at the map, you can see how if you smushed everything back together, it would kind of be like a puzzle, and all the continents would fit together. And so at a certain point over millions of years, those started separating, but the continent of Africa was bumped up against the continent of India, according to some. And particularly this one zoologist, Philip Sclater, claimed that, I believe it was 1864 or in the vicinity of that time frame. That's where the name Lemuria came from, because he found that there were the same kind of lemurs in the east coast of Africa and the west coast of India. And he's like, how is that possible? And so, he started postulating, and, I may not have all my facts right about exactly the positioning of the plates and what his premise was, but you can look up, if you look up on Wikipedia, Lemuria and Philip Sclater, then you'll see all the details about that, because I don't have them right in front of me at the moment. But basically, he used the word lemur because the lemur was his sign as a zoologist that something was going on, and these bodies of continents used to be right together. And so Lemuria was purported to, or he thought, so maybe it was the continents were together, or he was thinking there was another landmass that connected them before it sunk. And that's what he called Lemuria, after the lemurs. And so that's where that came from. So the name Lemuria is beautiful, but it's not what they called themselves. If they were to name themselves back then, if anybody had a name for them in their time frame, it wouldn't have been Lemuria.
No.
But the ancient Vedic cultures and the ancient Indian cultures talk about it as Kumari Kandam, and K-A-N-D-A-M means continent. So Kumari continent, which is interesting for some of those of us who know about the Kumaris. Sometimes we connect that with Venus, and that was like the way station where some of us, as star seeds and volunteers, when we waved our hand and said, "We'll go to Earth."
Why?
We did it.
We did.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Yeah.
And so we came as the Kumaris, and then there's Sanat Kumara, who is like sort of the solar deity, if you will, more the being who is sort of the operating. I don't even know what you would call him, the operator, the main king, whatever, the leader of this solar energy of this area, this region in the galaxy, right? Yeah. So the Kumaras, the Kumaris, and they called it Kumari Kandam. So that also gives us the idea that, you know, we were maybe more involved with our other stellar families,
the star family,
and understanding a little bit more about all of that back then, maybe not having so much of a separation in our thinking.
Yeah. So where I know there's various ideas on this. Where, from your understanding, did the Lemurians come from? This, because I know there's a big thing saying they came to the Pleiadian star system, that they were the ones that seeded the Lemurians here, that were there for thousands of years. And that was the other thing. It was over thousands of years, wasn't it? They're saying it's like from 35,000 years ago, or more than that, and that they were there for some time to develop their civilization. But from your understanding and your knowledge and what you've researched, where do you see that those Lemurians actually came from? What star system did they come from?
That is a great question, and I feel like it's more than just thousands of years at a block. This is like, we're talking tens and hundreds of thousands of years, and even millions of years potentially. So the history is vast and long. Now, to back it up a little bit, like, let's just put it in context with the Lyrans. So the Lyrans were one of the early races in this universal system who went out with a bang with a lot of really kind of warrior energy, just kind of charge ahead, creation energy. And, you know, the Pleiadians came much later. They were kind of the great-grandchildren of the Lyrans. So a lot went on back then. Like, you want to go to the Akashic Records and look into that.
Yeah. And the Seven Sisters, I know I've been reading a little bit on with Cryon's channel, who gives a really great lot of information on the book called The Women of Lemuria, that was actually written by Monica. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. You'll have to look at it. What is it? Monica Murani. And she works with Cryon, and she's transcripted so many things of his channeling. And he talks of them coming from the Pleiadians, and all women, all that they came to birth for the women, and they then seeded the children through the human male. But that they were a very spiritually highly evolved race, a very spiritually highly evolved civilization. So, but do you feel there was other star races that were also part of Lemuria?
Well, I had experiences encountering the Hathor beings, and again, the placement of these things in time and space is tricky, but I once, saw with my inner sight a Hathor seeding ground. And it was really interesting because I was like, you're sitting there like, what am I looking at? It's like, it was a circular construct where literally what I could tell is there was birthing or cloning or something going on there. And so I don't know exactly if it was the same kind of cloning or birthing that we would know of today, but like this stuff is old, and even the Anunnaki were spoken of as having basically tried all kinds of different things to create this human race, and they would do it. They first tried just to impregnate females directly, and then they found that was the first Adamus, that was the first root race or what have you. And then that was found to be not as coherent as they wanted, or something like that.
Yeah.
And so they then did what you say. They placed the fetus, or they seeded in the semen of the Earth race into the elder race females.
Yes.
And got a better result that way.
Yeah, well, that was a lot of what Cryon had said as well.
And then there's, it's recently has come out that there's over 22 races that had been peeping at humanity for God knows how long from the back of the moon. And that's what they were just like, those googling eyes. That's
It does make you think, though, just how much of this has gone on over time that we aren't aware of. But I do feel that information is very much coming about now, coming much more into the consciousness of people now, and for a reason, because there's been so much recently. And I know when you focus on something, you notice a lot of that same thing.
Yeah.
But since we decided to have you on our podcast, the amount of information that has popped up about Lemuria, and you're overhearing people talking about it and everything else has been quite incredible. And I just thought there's a real acceleration linked into our consciousness, our expanding consciousness, to that energy of Lemuria and what they had achieved while they were here on Earth.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, and so, our ancient relatives had a very different way of being and interacting with the planet and each other. But they, if we're talking about this panoply of potential races that came and over thousands and millions of years, had interactions with the human genome here. That's part of why we're so special here. That's what part of why the Earth, the human, is such a special being, is because it's been given many gifts. And that's why, we're so precious. And I'm getting chills. And so really, if you're listening to this and you think you're just a lowly human, it's like, no, you're cosmic royalty. And so, we're reclaiming that knowledge of our royalty as children of the one source. And as aspects of the one source, and ultimately we are all are the one source. And that's the advanced self-realization knowledge that these ancient wisdom teachings have brought forward, that was, when I tune in my meditations and from what others have said, that Lemurian race that we call Lemurian, they knew that. Can you imagine knowing that every day, all the time? Like, I'm looking at you and I'm like, there goes God. There's God. Oh, look, everywhere. There's only this one power, this one presence, and this one being. Effulgent, effervescent, overflowing love.
How beautiful that must be. So how do you see that race, that civilization actually lived with that deeper understanding, how they live day to day with that divine consciousness? How would you describe how they lived, and how with this really raised consciousness that we know now is beginning to reawaken in us? But let's just stay with how they would have lived with that consciousness at that time.
When I tuned in my meditation in preparation for this show today, I encountered the energy of a vibratory reality, a sonic reality, where there was, it's almost like, I felt like one of the impressions I was getting, that the bodies were very much larger than our bodies are now in stature. And that they were very much more connected to nature, like not feeling distant or separated from it. And that they used their voices, like, I don't even know if I could do it, but I was hearing these sounds like, ooh, kind of the undulating, vibratory sounds, and the sounds had power. And they even, like, what I got this morning, and we can all look at this together, but we had the mastery of the elements through the voice and through the sacred sound. So, in other words, moving things, building things, creating things in the earth plane was not as heavy lifting as it is now.
Oh, you've reminded me. Wow. Number one, I was going to say, because all the planets have their own sound, don't they? Have their own sound, their own vibratory. But it's funny you should say about the rocks, because, I used to joke, and I knew it was true on one element of that everything has consciousness. You know, not only us, you know, the chair, our cars, the rocks, the crystals, the soil, the air, the water, everything. And Paul and I often connect to the consciousness of the water when we go kayaking or when we're in the ocean, and often we'll give back light language to it. But I was going to say also that this vibratory sound is such an important part, isn't it? And that, again, one of the big things that's becoming much more popular on Earth now is sound baths, sound vibration, because our DNA is being reawakened from those Pleiadian times. And again, in the book of Cryon, it said that there's over 30 million of us now that would have been seeded and had lives in Lemuria. And that, like we said earlier, that this chromosome that Greg Braden mentioned, that we're now in the process of reactivating our 24th chromosome, which is the first time in over 200,000 years. And this chromosome is the one that's connected us to the stars, to our multi-dimensionality, but it's also the one that connects us, guess what, to our Lemurian lifetime. So this is why it's becoming reawakened, and it's such a fascination for so many of us that we're all so curious about.
But I think as well, like you say, with that vibratory energy, because that's what, there's been a real explosion with the light language becoming much more awakened within individuals of late. And that's all about, that's not about having this English language or whatever language you're speaking, but it's all about the resonance of it. And I've always been fascinated as well with the pyramids and how they were built, as well as in the in building in the mountains of Peru and other such places. And I think to myself, how did they move these enormous blocks? And there were so many things they never finally know, but one of the things that I believe to be true is that they used vibration in order to almost levitate the big masonry blocks that they were using in the construction to assist in how easy it became to move them around.
And so, do you remember, Michael Tellinger talks about this a lot. Do you remember seeing pictures of beings? It's either like a bird-headed being or an Anunnaki type Lemurian being, and they have these conical shaped rocks in their hand, and then they have this little purse in their hand. This is like something that repeats over and over and over again. And so I believe it was Michael, who his theory is that, though he found a bunch of them in South Africa, all over the place, and all these rock formations that are basically made by the sound under the earth, to shapes that are like that. And but he feels that those that's what was used to lift these rocks and things like that. And there's this thing called liquefaction, which has been talked about more recently in terms of the mud floods and resets and all that, which is a whole other rabbit hole. But if you can imagine like that, the sound and the frequency being able to change the state of matter. So changing hardened earth into liquid earth and then pouring it, because a lot of this like old rocks and like you gotta, like when you start really looking like in riverbeds and other places, you see these old structures that look slightly man-made, and you know, we gotta start going, wait a second, like there's so much infrastructure, and even some of the river stones and all that, sometimes they look all squared off, and and if you just put your thinking cap on when you're out in these places and be like, what am I really looking at here? Because was this an old site? And how did they, I mean, in other words, obviously they were also much larger in stature, because some of these rocks that are just like beyond ginormous rocks, that nobody could even, like, we have no equipment that can move them right now.
Well, I know I was listening to somebody that you sent me to Flo Karuna, and he was saying that obviously the Lemurians were very advanced with their telepathy and their premonitions and all that kind, you know, these highly evolved, and he was saying that they telepathically communicated with the rocks, and the rocks would move for them. But also, he was saying you could leave a note on the rock with instructions as where they'd want it to go. And again, because words are imprinted, aren't they? Words are energy, and that they would go where. I wondered if they had one that was in a bad mood. I said, no, I'm not going. Yeah,
I'm going to go there.
But, you know, when you think about it, you know, I do a lot of animal communication and, you know, mediumship work and all this, but it's just about being in that right resonance, isn't it? In that same vibratory rate that the Lemurians were known for, like you said, living in unity, living in complete harmony with nature, with the animals, with the critters, with the water and the air, and it's just fascinating.
It is. And then building beautiful structures, like some of these ancient temples, we really don't know how old these things are. Like, people try to limit it and make them seem like they're more recent. Like, as a general trend, obviously it's a very general, broad, sweeping statement that cannot be taken as fact. The general idea is that history is not what we think it is.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the timelines are much different. Some of these buildings may be far, 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 far older than we can imagine. And they were built to last, so to speak. And they have lasted. But that they were built as living libraries that would last on purpose because they knew stone would last a long time. And then it's a record. It was not. It was. They were teaching building. The building itself was a teaching device, and then it was also built to teach later civilizations and to remind us of what was, you know, going on.
So you know how the Egyptians had all these writings in stone on? Did the Lemurians also
Did they have
do
a
that?
written language?
Because I know with the Vedic and a lot of the ancient Indians and the Egyptian. You know, you'd see all these writings.
Or the Sanskrit.
Yeah, the Sanskrit.
And imagery.
It's an interesting question. I don't know the answer. We'd have to do some sleuthing in the Akashic to look at whether Lemuria was a written or it was all oral. I would lean towards a large portion of it probably being more oral and not written. And we can also look at the Vedas, which are very ancient, more ancient than we can imagine.
Yeah.
And that Sanskrit language also being very, very ancient. But those languages, I don't know if you know about Hebrew and Sanskrit and maybe even other languages, but if you take a shell, like one of those spiral shells, conch shell, I guess. Is it a conch shell?
Yeah.
The one that spirals?
Yes.
Yeah. So cutting that at a certain angle and opening it is where the letters of Sanskrit and Hebrew came from.
Oh.
So in other words, if you think of language as a whole, so the original spoken word, whenever that came about, came from this, you know, you could say magical idea that the language itself initiated in unity and all fits together perfectly. But it can then, of course, since then, there's been distortion after distortion after distortion, and the whole Tower of Babel thing, and dividing it all up and making us not understand each other. That's a whole other huge conversation that we can have.
And is it also correct that the Lemurians only had one lifetime on Lemuria? They didn't keep reincarnating. I know Cryon has said this, that it was almost like Lemuria was a teaching school for them. And once they'd had a lifetime there, and they did have a long lifetime as well, from what I understand, much longer. Then they'd incarnate to another civilization or another part of the earth that they didn't, because that was very much their training in Lemuria.
Okay,
interesting.
I mean, again, there's so many different people who've channeled in whole bodies of knowledge about what happened then, and exploring all that would be fascinating. And you know, for me, it's more of a personal experience of direct memories. And and things like that have happened to me.
Yeah, would you like to share some of your direct memory with us then?
Sure.
Would you feel happy to do that?
So the one thing, I was on a outing with a group of people who were looking to build a community somewhere. There were like 10 of us hanging out one day, and me and one of my friends were sitting together, and we kind of just dropped into that space, and we both started having Lemurian recollections together. And we just became aware that that's what was happening. And so in that awareness, you know who you are if you're watching this. We were at the part of the civilization where we knew the flood was coming, because we knew the flood was coming. We were not unaware that's what was happening, because again, those beings were very aware of what was going on in the natural world, and very psychic and long seeing, and knew their place, and didn't believe they were just a body either. So they weren't as attached to the body like we are right now, like in fear, because they knew that it's a transient, ever-flowing thing, and that their soul, like you said, could go off and have different experiences in different places. But what I recalled from that timeline and experience, well, first off, I recalled picking up a handful of soil. It was kind of like I was leaving. I knew I was leaving, and then I picked up this soil, and this soil was so alive. Oh wow! It was like it's like it had golden specks of light in it. It was like dancing and living and full of microorganisms. It was like the most amazing thing. I was like, oh my gosh, this soil! I want that soil again. I was like longing for that soil.
That's when you really feel in your soul. Something you just don't doubt.
Absolutely. And then it sort of switched to this time period where we knew that that things were going to change on the landscape, and some of us were going to stay and some of us were going to leave. So my friend was leaving on a boat, and I was staying. And so others have had this memory, and it has also been documented elsewhere, which is that, we as the waters came, to hold the higher consciousness for those who might be afraid of leaving, we stayed and sang as the waters rose. And of course, with the Vedic knowledge and the ancient yogic knowledge, or they wouldn't have called it yogic knowledge back then, but they knew how to weave out the top of their head. If you're done with an incarnation, and yogis, the really super advanced yogi siddha powers, there's one of the siddha powers is to leave when you're done.
When you're ready.
So it was much more of a different understanding about the body and our life and who we are and what we're doing here and all these things.
So with those beautiful, thank you for sharing that with us. That's just so sacred and special. And that was the other thing, wasn't it? That the Lemurians saw all life, every aspect of life, as sacred, because everything had consciousness, therefore everything is divine. And I feel there's a lot of us moving back to that now again. That DNA is awakening us now in this time. But there was that also, so the demise or the ending of Lemuria came, for those that don't know, through, as Chiraya just mentioned to us, through floods. And is there any more you can tell us about that? What happened during that period? And then, because there's a lot of talk that it is, that Lemuria was now part of Hawaii, and it spread out to Easter Island and to Africa and Egypt. What do you know about that ending of Lemuria?
So with both Atlantis and Lemuria, these are both long-term, expansive civilizations that had different seats of power on the land at different times. And, if you think about flooding that happens today.
Well, we know about that in Florida. We've had 3 in a month.
It occurred to me recently, I was like, were those guys doing that back then too? Like to cause, like we don't know what we don't know even about how Atlantis sank, much less Lemuria. But one thing my guides told me, I don't know, a decade ago or something, they showed me it was just kind of like a normal day, and all of a sudden they're like talking to me and showing me these things. I'm like, it's almost like they're letting me in on it easy so I could take it in chunks.
Yeah.
But they said about 300,000 years ago, there was an explosion followed by an invasion.
Right.
And so that explosion might have been something like a big rock hurling at us, or a spaceship, or a bomb, or something. But the sense was that, it was contrived. It wasn't like a natural thing.
Okay.
Well, because that's what I was thinking. I think we were talking earlier that if the Lemurians lived so in harmony with everything, with the earth, with the elements, with the cosmos, why would this have taken place? So there was obviously another influence, wasn't there?
An explosion and an invasion. And they gave me a couple days to feel into that. And then the next thing that came through was, and we lost Earth.
Okay.
And then I'm like, then I'm like having that memory, right?
Yeah.
And the feelings that go along with all of what that was.
So you said about that some chose to stay and some chose to leave.
Disperse to different locations.
Now, when you say disperse, I mean, what I heard was they dispersed over Earth.
Yes.
Possibly
some left too. I don't know what was going on with spaceships and all that.
I mean, I would have thought it might have been a bit of everything.
Right.
Really.
Probably, yes.
But those that would have left and stayed on Earth, then assisted in building the Earth civilization that we've grown into now.
Yes, but with a lot of time in between. So if we're talking about Lemuria, which is tens and tens and tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands to even millions of years ago, when maybe more than one of these floods and diasporas happened, right? Just like with Atlantis, there was known diasporas that happened where, so my sense was when I was having that memory that my friend knew where it was going. Like there was already an assignment, there was already a decision. We already kind of knew what was going to happen because you can sort of see the energy and that then they would go reseed, rebuild. And then, when that kind of tragedy happens, the people who go take their knowledge of the former civilization and whatever tools they have, but then maybe some of it gets lost along the way. And then they maybe meet with other people who have different knowledge, and then a whole new language, a whole new culture starts to flourish. And it's probably not as robust as the mother culture whence it came.
Yeah, because it's kind of watered down in one sense.
So you can think of that happening over millennia, hundreds of thousands of years, over and over and over and over and over again. And if you want to understand a little bit more of that, this guy named Ken Cousins at Gemstone University has a 17, I think it is, part presentation that he gives where he talks about the more recent thing that happened with Atlantis, which is that England, merry old England.
I think I know that.
British Isles stayed a little higher than a lot of other places. And so there was like not a break in the knowledge of the civilization, who they were, how things worked, and, how to grow food, whatever, all the things, right? And for whatever reason, the little tweak in the mind there, those guys, some of those guys anyway, are the ones that get claimed power. Instead of like going around and helping everybody remember and lift themselves up, they said, oh, what an opportunity. Let's use, abuse, and trick and deceive them and lie to them and make them our slaves.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
Jolly good fun.
Yeah.
And is that where the Anunnaki came in, or are we going beyond past that
earlier,
time? That was
I think.
earlier,
Yeah. So the Anunnaki is more like the Lord knows. Like again, these timelines are really hard. You guys one day will be enlightened about all that.
Yeah.
Like hundreds of thousands of years.
Well, I think that's coming because who was we listening to? We were listening to Bashar just last week, and he was saying that within 5 years there will definitely be open ET contact, and then being on Earth, obviously loving, friendly ET contact and that will come and give us knowledge. But he said there will be a holographic screen that is going to show us our entire history.
I ordered that. You can thank me later.
Yeah.
But I think we have been deceived and lied to
beyond any possible imagination.
So I can't wait for this.
And it will, and I think it was, although at the moment we think of this holographic like screen as such, it might even at that point just be instilled within us, like telepathically, because
maybe we can all hang out.
We'll be evolving so much more at that point that we can then start tapping into that information in a much more direct way. And I think, so who knows? It's exciting.
Yeah, it is. It's so exciting. And I know that I was, when I was doing some research, it said that Lemuria was created to set the stage for what was to come. So that ties into them just having one lifetime there and then incarnating elsewhere. But
again, you're talking about one portion of one very vast time period.
Yes, because it was over.
We don't know. That's one chunk. And and also,
sorry, go on. No, I was just going to say, getting back to the way they lived with a much more balanced way of life, didn't they? One of more compassion, one where they were much more just so in tune with that innate wisdom.
Yeah.
So what do you feel ended the civilization of Lemuria?
Well, okay, so some of I've also listened to a lot of conferences and researches from others, and the general overarching concept is that, the idea of what we call Lemuria, which could have been multiple civilizations over multiple tens and hundreds and thousands of years of time, would have been just like anywhere. Like civilizations shift and change and grow and fall. Maybe those have more longer lasting ones, but it wouldn't have been just one civilization.
Yeah.
It would have been multiple civilizations over eons of time that then began to, and particularly focused in the land masses that are empty right now, as they're under the ocean. So the idea is that the motherland sank.
Yes.
And the motherland sank over time. And there may have been moments of great cataclysm where lots of stuff sank.
Yeah.
There's stories about that, but there's multiple floods. And there's even a book called The Adam and Eve Story, which was redacted by one of the 3-letter guys. But they hid it for a long time and released it again in 2013. Because evidently it has information that they didn't want out all over the place at certain time periods. And that has to do with that there's cyclical floods on this planet every 6,000, and then also 11, 12,000 years. Yeah. And one of them is more because of, so let's just say, for example, this is a theory, okay? Remember where that big explosion and that invasion happened we were talking about?
Yeah.
So some really huge thing hits Earth. Well, what does it do to the axis? The axis is here. The weather's perfect. Everything's fine on the planet. It's set up correctly. All of a sudden this thing comes and whacks it. And now it's like this.
Yeah.
It's got a wobble to it. Like, you think that's normal, guys? Come on. Seriously.
What's normal?
Yeah. The planet going like this, that's just how it is.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it was... Somebody else is talking, I don't even know who this was, Corey Good or somebody, talking about how there's big spaceships out slowly entraining the Earth back to its correct axis, which will mean eventually the weather will be proper again and we won't have all this freezing cold and ridiculous heat and all these storms and cataclysms anymore, because it'll just be corrected.
Yeah.
So that's something to look forward to. I'm voting for that one. It's like, who knows what is true, but
so it was definitely
made sense to me.
But I think as well, it's like with there's a lot of knowledge within Mother Earth itself that has obviously gone through these experiences and absorbs it as part of her wisdom. That the more that I feel that the more that we connect and ground to it, the more we can understand and to help us to expand with our consciousness and to bring about some of these memories of past experiences that we've had in those lifetimes, but also just a knowing of the true connectedness that we're heading back towards in terms of, appreciating the divinity and the consciousness of everything because we're connected to it.
That's at the end of the day, that's all that really matters. All the facts and the data and the information. Maybe we'll find out one day, maybe it'll take a while, but if we remember that God, source, love is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent.
Yes.
That's everywhere, knows everything, and is all powerful. And that's where we came from, and that's what we are. So that reawakening of the ability to tap into that knowledge and that omniscience is basically like, for example, being able to access the Akashic records. You're going to go in and retrieve the data out of this enormous database in the sky. Let's just say you don't want all of that running through your processor all the time. Millions.
So do you feel that?
Well, we're already partway there. We keep a lot of stuff in the cloud.
So do you feel, just summing up, that the reason why there's such curiosity and fascination now with Lemuria is that our DNA is being activated, we are moving. What do you feel are the multi-dimensional talents and abilities that we have that are coming back online out of the cloud, as Paul just said? What do you feel are those? Do you have any sense of what those abilities are and what we truly are?
Yes, absolutely. So multi-dimensional realities, as you're saying. And if we look at the Vedas and the siddhas, the powers of the yogis who train, there's 18 of them. Like, there's a whole list of 18 powers. And, there are more, too. But they include things like the ability to walk through walls, the ability to turn into another being, the ability to get really small and to get really big, the ability to leave the body when you choose, the ability to teleport, the ability to move things from a distance, the ability to create things out of thin air. None of this is out of reach, but it is, from my understanding at the moment, I'll say it does have to do with your DNA and the strands of DNA and how many you have, because that's part of what those abilities are connected to. And so perhaps, when they're turned off, that's what we call junk DNA, or the brain, which is just
although there's a controversial, there is no such thing as junk DNA, is there? They just don't understand it, so they give it that name.
They're just making an excuse to keep everybody from digging deeper.
What do you feel that we are moving into now, this greater connection to what we really are?
So the first, probably the easy entry point, rather than walking through a wall immediately, but I did have one teacher who did that one time. Wow. is telepathy.
Yes.
And moving from having to speak words to just understanding each other. And so as we become more psychic, I also am recalling the spiritual wisdom of some early training, which is there's psychic man and then there's spiritual man.
Yes.
So we don't want to stop at psychic man. No. We want to understand that having the ability to read the field, read information, communicate directly with others, that's all part of our natural ability. But for example, a psychic doesn't necessarily know if they're seeing the possible, the probable, or the crystallized future. So an advanced psychic person would probably not be so predictive as helping you understand, well, these are the possible outcomes. What do you want to do and shift in your consciousness? Was this awareness of what was going to happen a warning? Was it a celebration of what's coming? What was it for? Because really it's all about us learning how to choose. And this is perfect to end on, or come to more of a closure, or like bring this forward. Because what I was shown is, and this may be related, I'm just going to say, to our cosmic being, as well as potentially some of those lifetimes we had in what we're calling Lemuria on the planet, where we knew ourselves as source streaming human angels. And so source is streaming within us 24/7. We didn't need to eat food or any of that stuff. That was like not even part of the reality. And we could see every single thing that had ever happened in the past. We saw, there's like the timeline spread out like a fan behind us. We could also see all the possible futures out in front of us. and navigate and pick and choose and then go back maybe for information, and we're always streaming source energy and aware of all multidimensional holographic possibilities in this universal matrix of creation, which some say is similar to like being an avatar in a video game.
But it's interesting because I don't want to, we're really stretching this, but well, one thing is you talked about telepathy. I mean, we know, don't we, when we're in somebody's company, whether there's something about that person we're not sure about, or I've really resonated with that person. Yeah. We all do that so unconsciously, naturally, don't we? That's one thing. And I liked what you said about the difference with a psychic ability and spiritual, because I think, yes, there are a lot of psychics, but sometimes I question their integrity and their wisdom, because I think when you have a certain knowledge, you have to treat that with integrity, with compassion. And sometimes you do have to be a little bit diplomatic. You know, as you know, I give readings, I'm a medium, psychic, intuitive. And sometimes I think I just put it in the best possible way. But most of the time, like you say, it is possibilities, rather like an astrologer. Yeah. There's possibilities. Because sometimes you can tell somebody something's going to happen and they don't like it, so they'll change it. And also shape shifting. That's another thing that, you know, and manifesting our desires. So it's, at the end of the day, it's all about tuning into the energy of our highest consciousness. You know, and every day now, every morning I do my energetic thing. I've been doing it for years, but it's changing all the time. I think I call in the highest energy of my highest soul, my highest spirit, all the dimensions of my being, to live in the fullness of all that I am here and now. And I'm finding that is so empowering. And I just, you know, and this experience you said about this, you can go out, you know, like kind of holographically and come back. I had that experience the other day. I was kind of in a meditative state, but I felt, the only way I can describe it was like I left my body, saw a situation I was finding challenging, saw the answer, came back into my body, integrated that this is what I need to do, that's how I need to see that from a new perspective, change that. And then that happened 2 or 3 times and it was quite amazing. And I'm wondering now you said that, because that didn't occur to me, Chiraya, that we're now awakening so much more of our divine abilities within us, that it's kind of like second nature to a lot of us, because we're awakening to this DNA, this higher energy, that it's time to, with all part of this ascension process.
But it's funny because that you mentioned shape-shifting, because just at this last weekend, with my team Dharma, I did a channel talk, and they really strongly spoke about, you know, re-energizing and reconnecting to your ability to shape-shift and start interconnecting with all your multi-dimensional selves and existences. So we're not just this static being, that we have this ability. And the fact that this other thing with love, there's no past, there's no future, it's just all happening at the same time now. So therefore you naturally will have automatic access to all aspects. And I think that is an energy for me that is really coming much more into the known consciousness of us as us mortals at this time. And I think that's one of the things that that our teams have often said, is that it's bringing that information into this physical existence, which also then helps the growth and expansion of consciousness.
So another thing you guys are reminding me of. So back before this big explosion happened, like whatever the timeline is and whatever the particulars are, we're talking very general here, but there was a time on the planet where we were electrically very connected. Like we didn't need food, we didn't even need to breathe in the same way we're breathing through the top of our head. We were we were kind of like fiber optics of light, spiritual fiber optics of light to the source, to the central sun, in connection with any given plane, this planet.
I love that analogy.
Plane. And so in other words, that's part of what got broken and shook up when that big explosion and invasion happened. We kind of got knocked off our kilter.
Yeah. And
then we became susceptible to the slow machinations of this, whatever you want to call it, our wayward siblings is what it sometimes comes through as. Those beings and entities who decided to go to the path of deception and manipulation so they could have that experience because that's what they wanted. And the rest of us are kind of like, okay, at this point, you guys go off onto some other planet. You can hey, keep playing that game all you want. We don't want to do that anymore. And that's our free will choice to do it.
Yeah.
But that, it reminds me of the biblical scriptural saying, it's like we have to be as innocent as doves and as shrewd as wolves. So in other words, like, can you see in the dark? Can you understand that even though you're a loving, heart-centered being, not everybody is coming from that aspect right now. And certain souls just really decided to take that other path.
Yeah.
And they have played it to the hilt, and I must congratulate them on how good a job they did of deceiving everyone and jacking everything up, because they really did. And so we're learning about that, but partly because it's completely foreign to us as these little, like whatever we call it, innocent souls that had never had. We were in oneness. We didn't. It never would have occurred to us that some part of the oneness would try to
exactly
of the oneness
because it doesn't occur to you. Sometimes people have said to me, Caroline, you're so naive. But I think, but why? I mean, this sometimes I would say to you, but why? Is it scammers or people that bring the things down? And I go, but why do they want to do that? And it's like, because they enjoy it. And I'm like, why do they enjoy? I don't get it.
It's foreign.
So funny.
It's foreign to us. But part of, if you want to talk about this as lessons, which ultimately there's no lessons, we just are. We're pure being. But we are learning a lot of different stuff to be here. And one of those things is to really comprehend that not everybody is the same in terms of how their individuated aspect as an embodied soul. Now they got other monkey business that they're messing around with that might not come common sense to us because we're not used to that kind of thinking.
But you can see now why it's so much is being disclosed and coming out, and that those of us that are not of that way, because to me there's no lower, there's no higher, there's, we're all equal. But those that can hold space to live a life in more alignment with our higher self, in more alignment with that divine consciousness. It's so important now with all this chaos going on and all this. We just hold space. We just remain calm. We just keep being in that peaceful stillness, just as the Lemurians did. They were loving. They loved everything. They saw everything as sacred. They embraced everything. And they lived in that harmony, didn't they? And this is where I think this is why there's a lot of us here now, light workers, energy workers, healers, anyone that's loving and caring now needs to really be in their sovereignty, to stand in that strength and to come from that consciousness of our divinity, of our, like you say, of our multidimensional selves.
And not be afraid of the shadow work, because having entangled with those wayward siblings for quite a few millions of centuries or however long, thousands of centuries, we learned some bad habits. And we went into our left data brain and we forgot the connection with the higher spiritual consciousness, and we got trained to think of each other as separate. So we became jealous and we became greedy and we became, we decided to hurt others and take things from them, and all of the 7 deadly sins and all of the what do they call it in the Vedas? I can't remember maybe it'll come the yamas and the niyamas. Like what to do and what not to do. We always have a choice, but literally we got trained into certain ways of thinking. We got conditioned by certain media and certain habits. We got conditioned by our families. So don't beat up on yourself for the fact that you've got these habits, these samskaras. We're cleaning them now.
We are, and there's just so much purging going on. But
I often think about it. And many decades ago, we was on a workshop with someone who lived nearby us, and he said that in the human form we was as furthest away from God as we can get, and now we're on our journey back. And I think having seen and been aware of all of this, all of the darkness, all the shadow elements, is part of that learning. And we've had to go through and experience that before we start moving back towards the higher vibration and the light, so to speak.
It's the prodigal son story.
Yeah. So I think, Chiraya, thank you so much. I think we could carry on for hours.
We easily could. I got 10 tangents to go on right now.
We can't thank you enough. I mean, we've barely scratched the surface of Lemuria, have we?
Yeah, and also it's like there's a lot of information for people who want to study it that's already out there that different people have channeled in or researched or studied. And there's no one depository of this is the final factual data.
Absolutely.
No.
Yeah.
Where would you? Is there any particular sites you would guide people to that really want to have? Because I know we're all awakening to it. We want to find out more. Is there anywhere in particular sites or websites you would suggest?
Yeah, I mean, the Lemurian conference just took place at Portal to Ascension, so I believe that's available over there at portaltoascension.org.
Portal to Ascension.
So there'll be a lot of resources in that multi-day conference for speakers. And then just start researching, like plug in the word Lemuria, plug in Kumari Kandam, plug in the continent of Mu into a search engine and do, people do their own research.
Yeah.
But, this is like everything tries to be separated in this world. But if you go back to the Vedic scriptures, there's so much knowledge about all of these things we're talking about in those repositories of information. And if you start looking at the physical temples and you start studying Vastu Shastra and understand how the temples were built and why and what codes they were using. I mean, there's just a vast amount of knowledge and so many arenas to go in. But that's why, not to be overwhelmed with the data, as much to do what you were saying earlier, to go within and to sit with that energy of that presence of oneness. And what does it feel like? And what is it? Because it's not separated. That time frame back then is not separated from us now. There's a through line. And so we can tap into it now and feel the power and the presence of our multi-dimensional holographic oneness with all that is, and feel that source love within ourselves and for all things. And again, all the scriptures talk about this. All the different scriptures of the world are guiding us back. Love thy neighbor as thyself. And love God first. And so we love source and we love our neighbors as ourselves, and everything else is going to be added unto us. It's literally the truth. And so the living truth right now, regardless if we know all the details of the data, our job really, to my mind, is to do that. To keep doing that, and never give up. God gave us a spirit of faith, not of fear. And so to be discerning, to be wise, and to be loving at all at the same time. And to just be willing, like, Creator, please help me stop getting the wool pulled over my eyes here. I want to see what's really going on. At the same time, I want to protect my thoughts and my vibration. And it's a dance. It's a walk. It's a balance.
It is definitely a dance in that fabric of life.
The more we can be flexible, then I think that allows us to do that in a much more cohesive way.
Thank you so much. So if you want to find out more about Chiraya, she, as you can see, she's just like a mine of information. Whenever we get together, we always say we ought to get together more often. But she has a lovely book out called Love's Whisperings: The Authentic Spiritual Development. It's available on Amazon, and I would really encourage you to go and have a look at that. As we said, she's given you some really good places to research more if you're interested and curious about Lemuria. I know we are. thank you,
Yeah,
Chiraya,
thank you.
so much.
Yeah.
And you said it all. Just keep living from the heart. We're all for that.
Oh,
living
absolutely.
from the heart.
And we'll have to have. We know you're going on a new journey for a certain length of time, and when you're back, or maybe even when you're away, we'll have to reconnect again.
Yes,
because I think we've got so much more to talk about.
I will absolutely love it. Thank you both so much, and thank you everybody for watching.
Thank you so much for joining us. We really hope you joined our new format with our amazing guest, Chiraya. If you did like this podcast, please like it, please share it. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel so we can grow and we can all grow together and bring you more great content. So, from my heart to yours.
From my heart to yours.
And from my heart to yours.
Namaste.